Ye have heard that it hath been said, An eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you, that ye resist not evil. But whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if any man will sue thee at the law, and take away thy coat, let him have thy cloak also. And whosoever shall compel thee to go a mile, go with him twain. Give to him that asketh thee, and from him that would borrow of thee turn not thou away.
In the midst of war and conflict, there are those who choose to stand for peace. Today, we will be exploring the topic of Christian pacifism, and its relevance in World War II. Christian pacifism is a belief system that advocates for non-violence and opposes war and other forms of violence. It is based on the principles of love, compassion, and forgiveness, and has been practiced by many individuals throughout history. But what was the role of Christian pacifism during World War II? Join me as we explore this important topic.
What is Christian pacifism?
Christian pacifism is a belief that Christians should not engage in war or violence, but instead promote peace through non-violent means. This principle is based on the teachings of Jesus Christ, who preached love and forgiveness towards enemies. One example of Christian pacifism in action is the life of Martin Luther King Jr., who used nonviolent resistance to fight against racial discrimination in the United States. He believed that violence only perpetuates hatred and division, while nonviolence can bring about lasting change and reconciliation. C.S. Lewis, the renowned Christian author and theologian, was a strong advocate of Christian pacifism. He believed that violence was never justified and that Christians should always strive for peace. In his essay Why I Am Not a Pacifist, Lewis argued that while pacifism may be an ideal, it is not always practical in the face of evil. However, he also acknowledged that war should never be entered into lightly and that it should only be used as a last resort. In his book Mere Christianity, Lewis wrote,
"The real test of being in the presence of God is that you either forget about yourself altogether or see yourself as a small, dirty object."
This quote highlights Lewis's belief in the importance of humility and selflessness, which are key principles of Christian pacifism. Overall, C.S. Lewis's views on Christian pacifism were deeply rooted in his faith and his commitment to promoting peace and non-violence. During World War II, Christian pacifism was a relevant and controversial topic. Many pacifist movements and individuals opposed the war on religious grounds, believing that violence and killing were incompatible with Christian principles. One example of this was the Society of Friends, also known as Quakers, who refused to participate in the war effort or support it financially. Another example was German theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was part of a resistance movement against Hitler but struggled with the ethical implications of violence and ultimately chose to participate in a plot to assassinate the dictator. During World War II, C.S. Lewis's views on pacifism were a major influence on his actions. As an Oxford professor and well-known author, Lewis was a prominent figure in the debate on whether Christians should participate in war. Despite his initial reluctance to support the war effort, Lewis eventually came to believe that it was necessary to fight against Nazi aggression. Lewis's writings and speeches during the war demonstrate his evolving views on pacifism. In his book The Problem of Pain, he argues that sometimes violence is necessary to prevent greater evil. He also gave several radio broadcasts on the subject, including The Case for Christianity and Culture, where he discussed the role of Christians in society and the importance of defending freedom. The debate on Christian pacifism has been ongoing for centuries, with arguments both for and against the concept. Some argue that pacifism goes against the natural instinct for self-preservation and protection of loved ones, while others believe that violence only begets more violence. Different Christian denominations have varying views on pacifism, with some advocating for non-violence in all situations and others believing in the use of force as a last resort. One argument against Christian pacifism is that it goes against the teachings of the Bible, which includes stories of wars and battles fought by God's people. Others argue that pacifism is impractical in a world where evil exists, and that sometimes force is necessary to protect innocent lives. On the other hand, proponents of pacifism point to Jesus' teachings on love and forgiveness, and argue that these principles should guide all actions, including those related to war and conflict. The ethics of war is a complex and controversial topic that has been debated for centuries. One ethical theory that relates to Christian pacifism is the just war theory, which argues that war can be justified under certain conditions, such as self-defense or protection of innocent lives. However, Christian pacifists reject this theory and believe that violence can never be justified. Another ethical theory that is relevant to Christian pacifism is nonviolent resistance, which advocates for using peaceful means to achieve social and political change. This approach was famously used by Mahatma Gandhi in India and Martin Luther King Jr. in the United States. Christian pacifists view nonviolent resistance as a more effective and moral alternative to war. Nonviolent resistance is a powerful tool that has been used throughout history to bring about social and political change. From Mahatma Gandhi's Salt March to the Civil Rights Movement in the United States, nonviolent resistance has proven to be an effective means of achieving justice and equality. One example of successful nonviolent resistance is the Velvet Revolution in Czechoslovakia. In 1989, protesters took to the streets to demand democratic reforms and an end to communist rule. Through peaceful protests, sit-ins and strikes, they were able to force the government to hold free elections and establish a democratic government. The legacy of Christian pacifism is one that continues to inspire and influence modern society. From the civil rights movement of the 1960s to the Arab Spring uprisings of the 2010s, pacifist movements have played a crucial role in promoting nonviolence and social change. One notable example is the work of Mahatma Gandhi, who used nonviolent resistance to lead India to independence from British rule. His philosophy of ahimsa, or nonviolence, has inspired countless individuals and movements around the world. Another important figure in the legacy of Christian pacifism is Martin Luther King Jr., who was deeply influenced by Gandhi's teachings. King's leadership of the civil rights movement in the United States was characterized by his commitment to nonviolence, which he saw as a powerful tool for social change. Today, there are many organizations and individuals who continue to promote nonviolence and peace through their work, including Nobel Peace Prize laureate Malala Yousafzai, and the Dalai Lama. One of the main challenges to Christian pacifism is the belief that it is unrealistic and impractical in a world where violence is often seen as necessary for self-defense or protection of one's interests. Critics argue that nonviolence may work in some situations, but it cannot be applied universally. Another challenge to Christian pacifism is the criticism that it is passive and ineffective in the face of evil. Some argue that pacifism fails to address the root causes of conflict and injustice, and that it allows oppressors to continue their actions unchecked. However, proponents of pacifism argue that nonviolence is not passive, but rather an active resistance to violence and oppression. In conclusion, we have explored the concept of Christian pacifism and its relevance in World War II. We discussed C.S. Lewis's views on pacifism and his role during the war. We also presented the arguments for and against pacifism, as well as the different ethical theories on war. We examined the application of nonviolent resistance in real-life situations and its impact on modern society. Finally, we emphasized the importance of Christian pacifism today and the challenges that it faces. As we reflect on these ideas, let us remember that peace is not just the absence of violence, but the presence of justice and compassion. Let us be inspired by the legacy of Christian pacifism, and continue to promote nonviolence in our own lives and communities. Together, we can create a world where conflicts are resolved through dialogue and understanding, rather than force and aggression.